Nice to have you. Thank you for making time. So briefly, my background is I was in the corporate world for 24 years, 25 years as a founder of companies and the president of a few companies. Uh, Early in my career, I was an international auditor with Nabisco. I traveled to Australia and New Zealand and a lot in Europe, uh, and worked in multinational companies. And then 10 years ago, I stepped out of the corporate world and joined the faculty of the School of Business at Southern Oregon University. And around the same time, I moved on to a piece of land, and uh, this is what the land looks like. The, uh, the land is densely forested with ponderosa trees and fir trees, and for those of you that haven't visited here in the Pacific Northwest, you all have an open invitation to come see. And basically what occurred was I started learning how to grow food, and I studied a field called permaculture, which actually started in Australia, which has a lot to do with living in harmony with nature. And this was my teacher. He's a renowned ethnobotanist and conscientious objector of the Vietnam War in the 1960s, and lived off the grid and practiced green building and catching water and growing food and renewable energy long before it became known as sustainability. This is a picture of Tom standing in front of a pond that we built the first summer on my land, and this is the first tray of lettuce starts that we put in the garden. And what happened that first summer is, through growing food, and this is a picture of some of the vegetables we grew that first summer, I became aware of really how nature works for the first time. And we learned about how to bring pollen flow and biodiversity to the land. And I realized really how much I had missed during my own business career of 25 years of leading companies. And at the same time, that summer, I read a lot about the ecological crisis. This is a picture of Lester Brown's Plan B, which in great detail allowed me to understand how our planetary ecosystems are in peril. I decided to start a sustainability leadership program at Southern Oregon University, and we started looking at how businesses were integrating green building, renewable energy, alternative transportation. And basically another way of thinking about this is, if the Earth was our patient and we were all doctors, this is what we would be seeing.
That case of this.
And another thing happened the next fall. During the first day of classes here in Southern Oregon, it was quite hot, about 105 degrees, perfect storm for fire, low humidity, very dry. And as I walked across campus, coming from our annual opening faculty breakfast, where the whole faculty has breakfast together on the first day of classes, I walked towards the business school, and I could see big plumes of billowing black smoke across the sky. And as I got to the business school, a friend came running out and saying, "Your wife has been trying to call you. Your house is burning down." And I raced home, and a friend and I cut down trees around the house using a chainsaw as the helicopters and the planes flew overhead, dropping fire retardant. And long story, you can just see the roof of the house down below at the very bottom of the picture. And the house did not burn down. The fire did not cross the road and threaten our house. But an interesting thing happened that following winter is hundreds of trees on my land started to die from the top down. And I had forest ecologists and conservation biologists come visit, and we identified the California pine beetle had flushed out of the fire and landed on my land and started killing hundreds of trees by girdling the trees, which prevent the trees from being able to suck water up from the roots. And I show this slide and tell these stories about studying permaculture and growing food and finding beetles in the trees, because all of this led me to understand how little I understood about nature, how nature works, and how we as human beings are completely interdependent on nature. Here's another way of describing it, that we're destroying the earth, but unfortunately we're not changing the behaviors at scale that we need to. I started studying the sustainability literature, and most of you are familiar with a lot of it. And it all has to do with really what companies are doing to reduce their carbon emissions, reduce their water usage through alternative transportation and green building and renewable energy. But there was very little. What I was interested in was to understand, why is there so much resistance to change? Why are human beings not changing fast enough? And at the time, I couldn't find anything. Since then, there's been a couple of wonderful new additions to the sustainability literature that talk about the psychology of sustainability. Carol Castle is a colleague of mine that I think many of you know through LEAP, and a close colleague of Isabel's. She and I did our PhDs at Fielding together. And so I decided to, at the time I did my research, Isabel had not published her research, or I had not, I think Big Bang Being was just about coming out, and the article in 2014 was not out yet. And what was exciting is that Isabel and I, without knowing about each other's research, found a lot of similar things as relates to backgrounds of individuals that were working in the sustainability field in corporations. And so I decided to integrate this interest in psychology of sustainability into a theoretical framework. And these are the literatures that I used: developmental psychology, ecological worldviews, sustainability leadership, and interior leadership. And I'll talk about these each here in a minute. I'm just going to fly through these slides so we can get to a discussion with a little more detail here in a moment. But I'll let you take a moment and just look at some of the literatures that I use to study the psychology of sustainability. Everybody's still there? Whenever I'm doing this, you never know whether everybody's still there.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the developmental psychology literature very quickly. And these slides will be available, all these references I'm happy to send you after the call. So I'm just giving you a sample of some of the theory that I build on. Emotional intelligence and servant leadership. And then the sustainability leadership literature. And at the center of these literatures are two phenomena that I became very interested in studying: ecological worldviews and post-conventional worldviews. So how do I define them? Ecological worldviews can be thought of as the deep mental patterns for how we see the natural world. Can also be thought of as the cognitive and perceptual capacity to see the world through the lens of ecology. And in particular, I began to be very curious about how, with an ecological worldview, it can enhance our perception of our interdependence with Earth's ecosystems. Developmental psychology is a body of work that has been out there for about 50 years that built on childhood development, made famous by people like Jean Piaget in Switzerland and Kohlberg in the United States. And the findings are that adults can traverse these specific hierarchical stages of increasing complexity throughout their lives. And the reason why this is so important is this becomes the frame through which they translate all of their thoughts and their feelings, and it affects what they can be aware of. And in particular, developmental researchers have identified a stage of development broadly referred to as post-conventional, where researchers with post-conventional worldviews, or action logics, which is another term that has to do with stages of development, that post-conventional worldviews allow leaders to be more effective at transforming organizations. Here's a quick slide I won't talk about more other than to say that the research shows that only about 1 in 10 adult professionals are operating from a post-conventional worldview. So it's the minority. The vast majority of people running organizations at universities or in corporations or at non-governmental agencies are operating from what's known as a conventional worldview. And so based on this gap in the research of not having a lot that's looking at ecological worldviews and action logics in the context of sustainability, I came up with a research project, and these are the questions that I ended up focusing on. Is how do sustainability leaders describe their worldviews and their motivation? And then do those descriptions reflect specific stages of development or action logics? So off I went into the field. This is a picture of me in Vermont a few winters ago at Ben & Jerry's eating ice cream. It was about 5 degrees below zero. For those of you who are aware, the temperatures in the northeast of the United States have been extreme in recent years. And here's the details of the study. I'll go through this quickly so I can get to the findings. I used a qualitative design. I did some quantitative research, but I decided to partition it for future studies using an instrument known as the New Ecological Paradigm Scale and also the Global Leadership Profile. But I decided to really focus on the qualitative aspect of the research. I ended up interviewing really almost 100, but for the purpose of my dissertation, it was 65 leaders in 40 multinationals, NGOs, and private companies. Here's a breakdown of the sample. As you can see, about half were multinational executives at the vice president or director level, with a smaller sample of private company presidents and NGO CEOs and a sample of sustainability consultants. Here's a sample of the companies. I'll give you a moment to just look them over. Here's a sample of some of the titles. Isabel and I both interviewed executives from 7th generation, and at the time, the sustainability director was the director of corporate consciousness. A fun title.
He passed away, the one who I interviewed. It was not the same.
Jeffrey Hollander? Or no,
no, Greg Barron. Greg Barron.
Yeah, I heard that. Great pioneers in Vermont of sustainability and in corporate social responsibility there. So here's a list of some of the questions, and by far the first question is what really prompted a lot of the data. It was just simply what was their motivation, how did they become involved, and they started talking about their backgrounds, and this led to 3 sets of findings. I'll just mention briefly that in addition to inductive and deductive thematic analysis and coding, I also use hermeneutic analysis, which involved bracketing my context and worldview and really thinking about the context of the people I was interviewing, as well as the theorists that I was using as deductive lenses to study the interviews. And it was a very deep, multi-month experience of really living with these interview transcripts and kind of a journey through time of the last 50 years, kind of the second half of the 20th century, first part of the 21st century, of thinking about how much has changed in the world over the last 50 years. So here are the findings. The First inductive thing that emerged was that the 65 sustainability executives talked about these significant life experiences that had influenced their worldview that they attributed to their motivation for their work, in some cases 40 years later, as corporate executives in sustainability. And some of these are very common sense, and I think a lot of us will relate to them, and may be why we're sustainability educators and involved in LEAP. We think about our family of origin and spending time in nature early in our lives. Several of the executives talked about great teachers or mentors. Each of you on this call may, in decades in the future, have students that talk about you that way. Several of the executives referred to experiences in developing countries where they saw firsthand the relationship between environmental degradation and poverty, experiences in internships in college or in the Peace Corps. And then a surprising finding was that many of them had left the public sector or the nonprofit sector and gone to work in corporations because they felt they could have a bigger impact. And they experienced a shift to capitalism as a vehicle for their environmental activism. And then the fifth life experience that influenced their worldview was kind of a sense of spirituality and service that Isabel and I have enjoyed talking about as well, and that she identified in her research very clearly. That's the first theme that resulted from me asking them simply where their motivation came from for being involved in the sustainability field. The second was a deductive process using the ecological worldview literatures to identify 4 expressions of ecocentric worldviews and ecological self. And these were awareness of ecological embeddedness, awareness of vulnerability of ecosystems, a more earth-centric identity, and a belief in the intrinsic value of nature.
What is
I should say that...
Sorry, what is an earth-centric identity?
Oh, when you wake up in the morning, you often think to yourself, okay, I'm a human being, I'm a member of a family, I live in a certain place, I might be of a certain nationality, and then beyond that, a kind of expanding center of identity is I'm a citizen on the planet, and beyond that would be I'm actually a biological mid-sized mammal as one of many species. Mm. So kind of an Earth-centric identity is where you identify yourself as really being on the Earth, and you kind of on a regular basis recognize that. And so that's kind of your center of identity.
Mm. Okay, thank you.
And then the third theme, and we'll have plenty of time for questions about all this, was another deductive thematic analysis where I was able to identify 6 expressions of post-conventional action logics, and these are awareness of diversity, thinking in longer time horizons, typically longer than a decade, enhanced systems consciousness, planet-centric, which is similar to saying Earth-centric, circles of identity and care, inquiring stance with increased vulnerability, and these highly collaborative approaches to leadership. And the way these manifest in leadership is by a less hierarchical, less top-down, but more from leading from the middle and trying to influence without control. And the potential with this research is offered by a study that, this is a slide from a study that MIT did a few years ago where they looked at 2,000 corporate leaders around the world, and even though 2/3 of them, and it's probably about 4/5 now, say sustainability is significant, only about 1 in 10 say their corporations are addressing them thoroughly, and they attribute this to a disconnect between thought and action. And by providing this, sorry?
Can I just on the last slide? Can you go back for a moment?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
So from this last phrase, that there is a disconnect between thought and action. Did your study give you some information about why that could be?
Not directly. I did not look at a control group of, say, non-sustainability leaders, and that would be also for future research, is to really try to compare executives that are motivated to take action and make sustainability their highest priority, and executives that are not. And so that disconnect between thought and action is an interesting area of future research that I welcome all of us as part of LEAP and in the sustainability and business education field to think about. You know, why do some people act and why don't others? I think what my research suggests is that the people that are motivated to act have some deeper sense of their ecological worldview that allows them to take this action that's not supported by the mainstream culture.
Okay, yeah.
Inside a corporation or inside society.
Yeah, thank you.
Great question, Isabel, and we'll keep talking about it. I'll just kind of wrap up, and then we'll have the remaining time to explore that further. It's a really important question. So the research suggests that there's a subset of senior executives and nationals that express post-conventional and ecocentric worldviews that contribute to their motivation, and it offers a new relevance for these, what up till now are literatures that really have been marginalized in the business curriculum. Even within the sustainability curriculum, as we talked about earlier, it's mostly about best practices and not about the psychology. And so people like Isabel and myself and a small group of researchers around the world are trying to, I think, integrate the ecological and psychological and developmental perspectives into the sustainability curriculum. This is the book that I have coming out. It's in production now with Greenleaf, the same publisher that published Isabel's Big Bang Being. So I'm delighted to join Isabel as a Greenleaf author. The model that I unpack in the book that I'll come back to here in a moment, but I'll just touch on now, is that there's this relationship between ecological worldviews and post-conventional leadership capacity and doing sustainability at a very deep level. So I call it the why, the how, and the what. And this morning on the call, Mehdi in Paris suggested how as a consultant he sees people practicing sustainability that driving new awareness. And that's exactly the question that I invite all of us to think about, is not only the arrow going from post-conventional to deep sustainability initiatives, but the other way. Simply by practicing sustainability, that causing new awareness and new development in executives, which is a very exciting implication. So I'll come back to it in a second. I'll simply mention that everybody at LEAP, and you may each be able to get a preview copy here when it's available in about 6 to 8 weeks. But in the meantime, they gave me these discount codes that are in the slide deck So the book will be anywhere from $21 to $24. And I'm delighted to, I should mention that I'm retiring from my full-time appointment at Southern Oregon University so I can travel more and teach part-time and speak and consult. My children are grown now, and so I'm planning a trip to Europe in the fall. And I also have several colleagues and contacts in Australia, and really am wanting to support educators like yourselves to really this mission that we're all part of, trying to accelerate the sustainability revolution, if you will. So that's a little bit of what I'm up to in the book. And I'll just leave with these questions, but I'm mostly interested in your questions. And so here are some questions that we can explore. Thank you for listening. The floor is open now for questions. Isabel?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, making sure you're here.
I think that we were still reading the future research questions.
Yes.
You know, one of them there, which is very interesting, is really how do worldviews vary across cultures and gender and generations. And so all of you on the call are of a different gender, a different generation, and a different culture. And my general premise is we need less American white males like myself running organizations. We need more women. We need more deeply nurturing ecological worldviews at the top of organizations.
If I can start, thank you, Steve, so much for your presentation. I truly enjoyed it, I must say. And if I can just respond to this last comment you made about how we need a diversity of people and genders to respond to this important call. I had a close friend of mine who is a computer analyst who we go for meditation classes together. And he recently returned to his home country in India. He works here in Australia, but went back to India for a family event, and then discovered that in the time that he was away, that the land that he used to, I mean, his family land where his father still does farming, was overtaken by the Monsantos of the world, really, where they were using lots of all kinds of weed killers, particularly Roundup, and all other insecticides that has really brought a lot of harm to a lot of people there, with many of his family members and villagers suffering from cancers of all sorts that they never had before. And one thing that he said that struck me most was he remembered when he was growing up, he saw very colorful butterflies and all kinds of insects on his land, and none of that exists anymore. And so he took it upon himself. Now, this is a computer analyst who's never been to, worked on a farm before. What he did was, the 3 months he was there, he consolidated himself, attended a course on permaculture for a week with a person who was a local expert in traditional farming methods. And he showed me photographs of about 20 to 30 people who were attending this course somewhere deep in a village with very Spartan conditions, he was saying, and they were learning those very, very traditional techniques which has over the generations been lost in the villages in India. And he and his friends, he has a group of two of his friends from the who are working in the US, Indian citizens who have migrated to the US, made their wealth, and are now coming back to India to actually buy lands and to try and bring organic farming methods and this traditional farming methods to introduce to the local farmers, because the local farmers now are very resistant to any ideas of traditional farming, because they think that you have the easy way of killing weeds with chemicals, and so even his own relatives were up against him. So that is an inspiring story, if you like. He's a young man who is in his 30s, early 30s, thinking of giving up his career in in the computer world and going back to farming, because he sees how important it is for his community, as well as he recently came to present his story to a group of master students in Monash University, because as an invited guest through a colleague of mine who is running a course here in Monash University on agrobusiness. And so it was really good because the students got first-hand experience, an account of what is actually happening on the ground to the farmers, farmers committing suicide and all these things because of not being able to maintain their farms, and how it has wreaked havoc in the lives of the local communities in different parts of the world. And there were young students who were speaking up and saying, for the first time, they are, they hear about all these things and they are looking at where their food is coming from, and some of them are thinking of going vegan, and all these kind of responses that we got from the students, which was very inspiring. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so I was just wanting to respond to that last comment that you made, Steve.
Thank you for sharing that moving story, and I hope your friend becomes the CEO of Monsanto.
Wow, yeah, tough one.
No question that this epiphany or awakening or realization of how wrong we've gotten many of the big systems, and Monsanto is a case study that many of us teach, and there's so many frightening aspects to their strategy. But I think the realization that your friend had is one that we want to support, promote, educate. So it's great that he's doing that, and great that he's inspiring students there as well.
Mm. I think go ahead, Catherine, yes.
Thank you, Steve, for this lovely presentation. It was extremely interesting for me, especially with regard to my own research. I don't have a question at the moment. I'm still overwhelmed by all the information. I just think it's so important to think about exactly the issues that you talked about. I attended a sustainability forum at AUT at the university in Auckland, where they tried to bring together people from different schools at AUT to talk about sustainability, and only one person talked about how we need to bring emotions or thinking back as a topic, and I thought, yeah, we need a lot more of the sustainability mindset discussion in these kind of forums. So yeah, I would love to read your book and dive into this topic more, so I can try to help people learn about these kind of things.
Great. One thing that Isabel talked about in her book, and I talk about in mine, and I think we all want to support, that I didn't touch on, is this idea of anthropocentric worldviews. And in the book, I talk a lot about it, and as you, just what you were saying, Katrine, about how there's usually only one person that kind of brings this up in a faculty on a business school or in a corporation. We're kind of subject to this multi-hundred-year inertia that is very interesting to become aware of. For me, I didn't know really I was under this umbrella, if you will. I call it the anthropocentric umbrella in the book, but it's defined so much of who we are as a global culture. Certainly, the paradigm of economic growth and technology is solving all the problems, and so the challenges that we all face as sustainability change agents and educators, I think being aware of that everyone has been educated in a system that predominantly comes from a kind of an anthropocentric, conventional worldview. And for me, it allowed me, for years I had students in my classes that would become very motivated and excited about sustainability, but then when I thought about the business faculty as a whole or the business community as a whole, I would realize, why doesn't everybody feel more urgency about climate change and these issues? And I would get very frustrated because to me it was so clear. And not until I started to think about it through this lens of anthropocentric and conventional worldviews that I start to kind of develop more perspective on it. That it's literally a function of what people can see. It's kind of their cognitive and perceptual capacity, and this kind of just is the opportunity that by kind of becoming aware of that, we can think about new ways to educate and consult, so that executives, it's not just about the next way to reduce carbon emissions or reduce water usage, or in the sad case in our country is this crazy debate: does climate change even exist? Which is up, in front of Congress. And so, anyway, I'll just mention this idea of anthropocentric worldviews is another powerful factor that we're all up against as sustainability educators and change agents.
Yeah.
Are you familiar, Catherine, with Paul Srivastana? I put it in the chat. I think I got his name right. It was also in one of your slides, Steve, I think when you were quoting maybe
I came across him before,
Yes.
I think.
I was reading an interesting paper he wrote in 2010 where he started saying, well, in the 1980s, I didn't know a lot about the environment and my carbon footprint was like 10 tons per year. And in the 90s, I started to understand a little bit about the problems in the environment and my carbon footprint was like 18 tons a year. In 2000, I knew a lot more because I was studying and researching sustainability, and my carbon footprint went to 22. And now in 2015, I know a lot. I teach and research, and my carbon footprint is the highest. So what is happening that the more we know, and still the carbon footprint keeps rising. And I think it's a little bit of a joke. But what he does is he says that it is not enough of doing this work on the cognitive side in our classrooms, that we need to engage the emotional side, the psychological side. He also talks about the physical, having a physical experience, like walking in a forest, going to places out in nature. And so I was thrilled to see that he also thinks of this different approach, going through the head, yes, but also through the experience, the body, and the emotions and the spiritual aspects. No?
Yeah. Yeah, in the book I talk about, for years with students, we would print our carbon footprints on T-shirts, on the back of our T-shirts, and it's just, really everything has to be redesigned. It's such a wicked challenge, but I think if more engineers have ecological worldviews, the quicker we'll be able to redesign all of the systems and consumer products to at least radically reduce carbon emissions and water usage over the next decade.
Can you go back to the previous slides, the one that with the 3 columns? No, that one.
Sure.
You know, another thought that I had when you mentioned this comment of Mary that many people are doing initiatives, and if that would bring them into developing a more advanced action logic like the post-conventional. And I was thinking that may be our job to help them become aware of what they are doing and what is behind. So it is not just, oh yes, I work in a waste company and we are researching new ways. So what does it mean? You're not just an engineer in a waste management company. What does it mean in terms of how we are connected with our landfill? I don't know, the social implications, the economical, the spiritual implications, the values, the identity. I think we as educators can bring them back into these other 2 columns through develop more consciousness.
Yeah, I think the allowing executives and MBA students the opportunity to reflect on how their values or worldviews might be changing is a great part of our job.
Mm.
Well, I think I relate to that very much because similar to the frustrations you had felt, Steve, about the academia where people are very much in the conventional worldview. You know, I've had come up against quite a bit of resistance, in fact, to this effort in the university, and so that's what, part of my motivation to now actually step out and go into the business world, really, to do some consulting work with executives themselves in this area of bringing the concept of spirituality and sustainable mindsets. I think that's where it's probably needed most, and hopefully will have the greatest impact as decision makers in corporations, as they you know, adopt this more of that post-conventional stance. I think then that's where the shift can occur. It has to begin internally, and I can see the psychological drivers, as you have termed it there, are very much inner work. You know, a lot of the sustainability initiatives. I mean, here at Monash, for example, we have a sustainable institute with a whole host of all those work that's happening, perhaps on your 3rd column. You know, whether it's on you know, water or environment or air. You know, it's all externally driven. It's almost like the mindset is almost like a warrior, like as if it's out there, the problem is out there, when actually the problem is within. I think the inner shift has to occur first before anything of substance and of value can occur outside. Because a lot of people may jump on the bandwagon only because it is fashionable for the time being, and then not truly understand the full extent and be able to sustain that kind of energy for an extended period of time to actually bring about any significant change to the planet, you know. So it has to touch them very deeply, as it did for the example of my friend, I guess, when he saw all his family members all falling ill and farmers' lives being, you know, havoc. You know, all lifestyles and simple lifestyles and cultures being torn apart because of this kind of invasion, if you like, of so-called modern farming techniques. So until and unless that, and the only reason why my friend even has this courage, I think, to you know, think about going back to farming in his homeland, is because he has gone through a whole period of spiritual work, you know, he and has evolved from that angle, and therefore to come and take up something as formidable as as facing up to the Monsantos of the world is not so scary. But for the average Joe out there, I think just like when you become overwhelmed when you see tragedies, whether it's like the Nepal tragedy or whatever, people just become paralyzed and just sit back, and become spectators at the end of the day,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Karthi. I think it's great that you're going to focus on consulting and helping executives tap into that deeper spiritual side. I agree completely. I look forward to hearing about how that evolves for you.
Thank you.
You know, Kathy, when you were talking, I was thinking of a proposal I had presented for a workshop in Sweden, in Gothenburg, in May. And this is a HR association, and my friend is in this HR association. So we started to talk. Oh, why don't you come and do a workshop? Oh, yeah, sure, I can do it. And so I sent this proposal. And when I write this proposal, I make the business case. All the things that I say you shouldn't do, I do it. It just came to me when you were talking, because I talk about, well, the importance that you need to understand. It is a competitive advantage. You cannot be the last one understanding what sustainability is. And this is, yes, of course, I relate it to the mindset, and that they will learn what are the elements and what keeps us in the unsustainability. All that is in the description of what they will get out. But the 2 paragraphs where it starts, what is it this workshop about, it's totally here. And now when you're talking, I feel like an infidel to myself, like I'm not even able to honor my own principles. How come I don't have the courage to stand up and say, well, you may hear a lot of business case, but this is only a trap. The real thing comes inside. I don't know why I don't do it. I don't think I didn't even do it on purpose. Just going with the stream, that is the first thing that you need to talk about. Horrible.
Sometimes I do feel like that. Sometimes I feel like that. When I came back to France in November from, England, Berlin, and Germany, I really love to start permaculture and know more about that. And I've not started yet. But it's something I would really like to do. But what I've started doing is, so last week actually, we gathered with few peers, one from London in England, another one from Munich, and another guy who came from New Delhi, a French guy who lived there. And we all gathered because we tried to put together a new type of coaching, which is a peer-to-peer coaching. It's for personal development, and so mainly at the moment I'm using Keegan's immunity to change method, and we are also working with Otto Laske, who lives in near Boston.
Who is that? Otto?
And Otto Laske he's been working all his life on the dialectical thinking. And it's something that is not very known, and I'm still in learning about it. And actually, last week I was still trying to make the link between how can how linking, because we always talking about we know that we are stuck into the cognitive area, and it's important to bring more feelings and experience, and actually to really, so I guess Keegan is quite good for that, to really look under our skin and understand and translate like the cognitive language to a more dialectical language. But I still can't see how we can link developing oneself to becoming more more aware of sustainability, or aware of or linked with the planet. Because I guess if we still carry on living in this power paradigm, like dominating type of paradigm, what is the bridge that can let us go out of this paradigm through personal development, spirituality, cognitive knowledge. And for me, I've still got this blockage here because we know that will be right. And I'm curious to know if you could give me an example of an experience that you had that could let me see this, through that, through understanding, and also, would you have ideas, for example, of what exercise of things people could do to go over this cognitive thing, so feelings, maybe coaching, personal development, which is actually, I've experienced that last week. A lot of people would consider being a sect or something. So when we start talking about these things, people are kind of scared. And would that be by, for example, if you're with students, would doing permaculture help also unlock this and go over this cognitive knowledge?
Sure.
Yeah.
And anyone, please jump in. I'll just give you my own experience, and I think it's great that you're working with Keegan's research. It in some ways connects all of us on the call. I talk about in the book that I've been meditating with my students for 10 years at the beginning of class, just for 5 minutes, and doesn't matter the class, doesn't matter the time of day, doesn't matter the age of students, whether they're graduate students in their 30s or 40s, or they're traditional undergraduate students, 18 or 19 or 20 years old, and reading their final papers after a semester or seeing them many years afterwards. Often it's that 5 minutes of meditation that they find is really valuable for their growth and development. For many times, I talk about in the book how just my anecdotal observation is probably for about 5% of those. So if there's 20 students in a class, only one of them has had experience with meditation before. And that means that 20 people or 19 people meditate for the first time in their lives for 5 minutes. Mm. It's amazing, and I have not observed over 10 years that ratio has changed. And so the question about what can we do to support a growing capacity to reflect and develop a deeper, wider perspective throughout all the spiritual traditions appears to be supported by meditation or prayer or reflection. My meditation teacher for many years taught one breath meditation. So it's kind of the most obvious, it's free, it's always there, but I encourage each of you as educators to have fun with that. It took me a little bit of time, not too long, where I would just sit down at the beginning of class, even the first day, in front of the class with my eyes closed, and just sit there. Don't say anything, don't introduce myself, and it's amazing how the whole class kind of quiets down, and so there's something about maybe just embodying, role modeling that as educators that, but I recognize that it's frowned on by many of your colleagues. It's not supported by administrators, but that's the kind of creativity or lighthearted courage that we all, I think, can embrace as educators, and that could drive this kind of access to post-conventional consciousness. That's just my little 2 cents about it.
Mm-hmm. Pauline, and I think also the work that you're doing now, collecting resources, exercises from our network, will precisely go in the direction of answering that question, because I don't think it is one thing. Since people are in different places of their own development, So, and they have different learning preferences and they come with different histories. So for one person, it will be the meditation. For the other was it a walk in nature plus all the other things. I don't think we can isolate one, but the more resources we have, the richer. It's like a toolbox that we are more prepared to offer triggers that, and some people will catch on some and others, and it will not be one transformational event that makes it like an addition of small experiences. I'm aware that we are over the hour, so let's just take a few moments and wrapping it up. If you have some more comments before we close this, for some very late, some others very early in the morning.
Isabel, if I can quickly respond to Charlene's query just now, I think at the end of the day, it comes back to the individual, and the inner shift has to happen within. And just as what Isabel just pointed out, it can come from many angles. In the yogic tradition, for example, there are 4 angles that it can come. It can come from the intellectual, that is the what you call the mental shift. Then there is the emotional shift, where you, from your heart you feel it very strongly in your heart. And then there is the action shift, which is karma, we call it in our yogic tradition, which is the way you act in the world is no longer the same because of this inner shift that's happened. And then finally there is the energy shift. Now the energy shift is what Steve was talking about, when he just sits in silence and then suddenly there is a certain sense of calmness and receptivity that comes just from his energy that he holds in his classroom, and students respond to that, that because we are all energy beings at the end of the day. So there are these four levels on where the shift can happen, and it can start from any level, from any one of those levels, but as you evolve, all 4 will align. That means your thinking, your feeling, your actions and your energy will all align. And I think as we are in the process of growing to that higher phase of evolution as human beings and spiritual beings ourselves, there will be some inner conflict that we all experience because the mind is not aligned to the body yet. For example, I mean, simple thing like waking up in the morning. You want to wake up at 5 in the morning, and then your body says, "No, I need to sleep when it is nice and cool here, warm in bed." So there's this inner conflict that we constantly experience. Until that full shift occurs at all levels as an integrated human being, we will still be on that journey. I guess this is why we're talking about it. Otherwise, we're already there. So I think we can all give ourselves a pat on the back, at least saying that we are, in our small ways, doing what we can to make small changes, at least, to become aware. That's the first step, and then the next step, it will slowly come. From my own personal experience, I've been watching the food summit. I don't know if you guys have heard of this food revolution thing that was done by Tony Robbins and Ocean Robbins recently, and where they talk about how the livestock industry that treats animals really bad. And although I'm Hindu, I'm not vegetarian, and I find that slowly, I'm trying to reduce my consumption of meat, and it is a challenge because it's years of habits, decades of habits that you're trying to change here. But it comes to a point where your body actually reacts to it. Like there were times when I, going against my knowledge and my feelings, I ate some meat, and then it didn't sit well in my body, So I think those kind of shifts has to occur slowly, and that's how we start, small steps, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Steve. And if we can go quickly around the screen and just say a closing comment about how this session was for you before we wrap up.
It was great for me to see you all again and to feel reconnected to the LEAP group. I haven't seen you for a while, and I'm just so glad that, I could, as I said, connect with you all again. Steve, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. I think it has incredible content, and it's so important that it gets out there into the world. So it's great that you take some more time of yours to go travel and tell the world. And I would love the slides, and I would love to read the book at some stage.
Maybe he can visit you and do Oceania, do Australia, New Zealand in one trip.
Yes, nothing like being together. I'm trying to figure out how to see you all again. I can't seem to do that.
You cannot see us? We see you.
I don't know why. Anyway, thank you so much for being together. I really look forward to being together either in Vancouver this summer or in Europe or in Australia and New Zealand.
I'm looking forward to your trip down under, Steve, because I think I've got lots that I want to as well, especially from your experience in the corporate world for many years. Me stepping into that world is a bit scary for me now, so maybe I can be inspired by some of the work that you have done. And yes, your book is something that I look forward to reading. And just to Isabel again, thank you so much for reconnecting. I have really missed this forum, I must say. So I look forward to being on it again. To meet up with everybody again.
Yes, I was thinking today that maybe we need to have a few more options, not just once a month this cafe, maybe do every 15 days and just open for whoever can show up, and we can have different topic of discussion, because everybody is so busy that maybe only once a month with one topic may not be enough. And now that we don't have the fast track anymore, there are other things that we can enrich in our exchange.
Yes.
So you may get you got frozen. Oh, Charlene is frozen. We don't see her. Can you hear us? Oh, she dropped off the call. Okay. Thank
you, everybody. So nice being with you.
Wonderful. And I have to stop the recording. Okay. It was a good recording. I think we got some good questions on there. So bye-bye, everybody. See you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.